Good day from Prince Edward County. I live on the North Shore, which is the Canadian side of Lake Ontario, and today for the virtual classroom I'm going to tell you a little bit about how energy is made. Now from my area, if you drive an hour or an hour and a half in any direction, you're going to see multiple ways that energy is produced. For instance, in the Great Lakes area we have a lot of nuclear power plants. These use fission, which heat up fuel rods, and they need the cold lake water to cool them off. Also, because wind crosses 50 or 60 miles of open water unimpeded, we have a lot of wind turbines that generate electricity too. Sprouting up in farm fields and on barn roofs and in town, we have more and more solar panels. This is another form of renewable energy that feeds electricity into the grid when the sun shines. An old-fashioned way of making power goes back to our abundant rivers and water resources, where old mills were built in the 1800s to use gravity's pool of water to turn wheels that in turn ground grain and sawed lumber. So we still use water power to produce electricity today. For instance, at Niagara Falls, one of the largest producers of hydroelectricity, will feed electricity to the U.S., like Buffalo, New York, and to Toronto, and all the great region around it. Some other ways to produce energy that go back even before hydroelectricity would be burning wood. We have lots of woodlands, and people cut firewood to heat their homes. Now, some innovative ways of making energy out of cow manure is a capture of methane, which comes from the rotting of the manure, and they make electricity out of this. So we're going to go through a few more ways that energy is produced, and we're going to look at how they impact the world. Although we take energy for granted and don't notice it as we go about our busy lives, it is being used all around us. It makes possible everything we do, day in and day out. Take a moment to think about energy production where you live. Where does your electricity come from? How do you heat and cool your home? Does your stovetop have an open flame, or is it a metal ring as the heating element? What makes the family vehicle run? If you walk and ride a bike everywhere you go, your fuel comes from the farm. It's the food that burns in your stomach. The energy from the sun is what provides our energy on Earth. The sun is made up of hydrogen, and a pressure process known as nuclear fusion releases the heat and light energy. Sunlight is captured by chlorophyll mixed with water and soil nutrients to grow edible plants. It was also plants millions of years ago that decomposed to form what we call fossil fuels, like coal and oil and gas deep underground. Some of the gas is trapped in shale beds, what geologists call sedimentary rock. The heat of the sun is what evaporates ocean water into the air to form clouds, that in turn rain out to fill rivers and waterfalls where we generate hydroelectricity. The sun's heat is what creates wind that blows the blades of the windmills. I suppose we must give credit to the moon, too, as its gravitational pull creates the ocean tides that are now being harnessed for energy production. My interest in energy began with my love of nature. I grew up in the green countryside of western Pennsylvania in the United States, but not far away were the steel mills and the coal-burning industry of the Ohio River Valley. When I moved to Quebec, Canada, I learned that fish were dying in the lakes. Even forests and maple syrup groves were showing the effects of acid rain. Acid precipitation, which could be rain, snow, and fog, were produced by sulfur dioxide emissions from giant smokestacks that drift hundreds of miles in the clouds, mixed with water, to create sulfuric acid. The acidic rain fell out of the sky on the northeastern states and the Canadian landscape. The same was happening between coal-burning Great Britain and the northern lakes of Scandinavia, as well as in Germany, where I went as a journalist in 1986 to speak with scientists who were studying Waldsterben, which means the dying forest. Eventually, through the 1990s, governments took action in regulating sulfur emissions as well as nitrogen oxide emissions in motor vehicles. But just as the acid rain issue seemed to fade away, a greater problem became apparent. It too was blamed on fossil fuels, which are made out of carbon. That's when we learned about global warming and climate change. It actually wasn't anything new. The greenhouse effect of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere had been known for decades. But now, extreme weather events and melting ice caps and rising sea temperatures were clear signs that this problem was real. Up until now, energy production was not happening in the backyards of most North Americans, but some voices crying out in the background were forecasting a doomsday when global oil supplies would run dry. We reached peak oil production already, they said, and now we needed new sources to keep up with the growing demand, or we were going to run out of oil. That would create chaos in society, because, as President Bush said, society is addicted to oil. Suddenly, unconventional means of energy production started showing up, even in our backyards. The oil sands of Western Canada that were too much trouble to mine when oil was plentiful were now economically feasible. And around 2009, we first heard the term fracking in Pennsylvania, where millions of gallons of water are injected down a 1-mile deep drill hole and pressurized to burst open the shale rock and release natural gas. During those same years, an offshore oil rig sprang a leak and a huge oil slick polluted the Gulf of Mexico. That was exactly 10 years ago on April 20th, 2010. 4.9 million barrels of oil flowed for 5 months. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill was one of the largest environmental disasters in American history. It broke my heart to think of the toxic black contamination destroying that rich sea life and the livelihoods of the commercial fishermen. Global warming, the oil spill, fracking in the forests I love, and the world's addiction to oil. All of this made me realize that a big shift was taking place, and it was attacking me personally. I decided to begin a personal project to visit all of the major energy hotspots and see for myself what was really going on. I learned that energy production is much more than engineers figuring out how to do things. Energy involves everything from politics and media to national security, economy, jobs, health, environment, and the differences of culture and religion. It is a corporate business that has to make money for its shareholders, and it's profitable as long as each citizen makes choices that require gas and electricity, like keeping the thermostat high in winter or flying on a jet to Florida, searching something on Google, or planting the garden with a rotary tiller. It's like an election. You vote each day for what kind of world you want, by where you spend your money. If you ride a bike instead of taking a car, you vote for clean air and fewer petroleum pipeline spills. If you look at grocery labels and buy produce that's grown locally, you prevent shipping from South America and Mexico. And if you pay a little more for organically grown, less pesticides means less petroleum too. Just as America has an addiction to oil, I have an obsession with energy. I have seen how it impacts every aspect of our lives. Over the past century, coal and oil and gas have allowed us to achieve great things, to advance agriculture and medical practices that improve lives, to travel for business and for pleasure, which fosters knowledge about the world we live in. But the scale of these fossil fuels has grown from scattered hillside pump jacks to enormous drill rigs and a constant flow and combustion of oil to serve 7 billion people. The planet and its relatively thin, precious atmosphere are feeling the negative effects. And despite vested interests that claim climate change is a hoax, enough circumstantial evidence exists for humans to employ the new and exciting technologies of renewable energy production. Part 2 of Energy Documentary will zero in on each type of energy, old and new,
and take a first-hand look from my cross-country travels at how they impact the environment and the economy. Please visit the website with a link to our Facebook page where you can leave comments and questions. And stay tuned to this YouTube channel for Part 2.